Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into a really monumental piece of legislation that's just become law. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025, or, the OBBB Act. We've got the analysis here, and our mission really is to pull out the most important bits for you, give you that shortcut to understanding what this actually means.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, how just one bill, and there's a contentious process getting it passed, how it fundamentally reshapes so much. We're talking the U.S. tax code, federal spending, even energy policy. It's just this sweeping set of changes,
Yeah.
immediate impacts, and, well, some really profound long-term ones, too.
Okay, let's unpack that. So at its heart, the OBBB Act, it's aiming to make a lot of those 2017 tax cuts permanent, plus introduce some new deductions, fund certain priorities, and roll back clean energy incentives pretty significantly.
Exactly. For individuals, I think the biggest thing is making those lower income tax rates from the TCJA permanent. And the higher standard deduction, too, that prevents what would have been a, frankly, major tax hike for a lot of people.
Right. And here's something that's going to hit home for many of you listening, especially in certain states. The SALT deduction cap,
Yeah.
state and local tax deduction. That cap, it gets a temporary boost, right? Up to $40,000 through 2029.
That's right, a temporary increase.
Yeah.
But, and this is important, it phases out for higher earners.
Yeah.
And it snaps right back to $10,000 in 2030. So planning is key there.
Okay. And good news for some business owners, I see. The state-level PTE workaround, that's preserved.
Yes, preserved. That pass-through entity tax workaround was popular, lets businesses sidestep the federal cap at the state level, so that stays. But thinking about those temporary changes, it really raises questions for your planning,
Right.
especially with that cliff coming. And then there's completely new things. Temporary above-the-line deductions. One for tip income, up to $25,000 a year, and another for overtime pay, up to $12,500, both through 2028.
Above the line, meaning you can take them even if you don't itemize.
Exactly. Reduces your income directly, makes them pretty widely available.
And then, maybe the most talked about piece, Trump accounts. What are these?
So they're new tax-deferred savings accounts. For kids, they get kick-started with a one-time $1,000 government contribution.
Okay, $1,000. But the interesting part is the investment mandate.
Right. The funds have to be invested in broad U.S. equity index funds. No picking stocks. It's a pretty novel approach. Signals a real push towards direct stock market ownership, basically from birth. Could reshape things long-term.
Interesting. Okay, shifting gears to businesses. What's the big picture there?
Well, for businesses, it's significant permanent tax relief. Big-ticket items, like restoring 100% bonus depreciation. So businesses can immediately write off new equipment costs. That's huge incentive.
Okay.
And immediate expensing for domestic R&D costs is back. Plus, that 20% QBI deduction, the qualified business income deduction, that's now permanent.
Permanent QBI. Wow. Okay, those are definitely powerful incentives for investing domestically.
They are, but
Yeah.
on the flip side, like you mentioned earlier, there's this dramatic reversal on energy policy.
Yeah, tell us about that. It sounds like a complete U-turn from the Inflation Reduction Act.
It really is. The act basically dismantles the clean energy tax credit system from the 2022 law. We're seeing credits for EVs, new and used, gone after late 2025. Residential clean energy credits, same thing, after 2025. Utility-scale renewables face much tighter deadlines, accelerated phase-outs, some outright repeals. It's a systematic rollback.
So a fundamental shift away from incentivizing green energy towards what? Letting traditional energy and business investment lead.
That seems to be the underlying bet, yes. Prioritizing immediate economic activity, you could say, even if it means walking back those environmental goals.
Okay, so let's zoom out. We've got tax cuts, new deductions, business incentives, energy policy reversal. What does this all mean for the economy?
For the budget, this is where things get contentious, right? Oh, absolutely. The projections are just miles apart. You've got the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. They project this act adds over $3 trillion to the national debt in the next decade. Their dynamic score, which tries to account for economic effects, still shows a $3.4 trillion deficit increase.
Okay, $3+ trillion added debt according to the CBO, but the White House.
Completely different story from the Council of Economic Advisors.
Yeah.
They're forecasting a huge economic boom. They actually claim the legislation will be largely self-financing because of all the growth it's supposed to generate.
Wow. That's not just a gap, that's a chasm in analysis. How can they be so far apart?
It really boils down to fundamental disagreements in economic modeling. How much growth do you assume from tax cuts? The CBO tends to be more conservative, maybe more static in its assumptions. The CEA uses dynamic models predicting much larger effects. We're just reporting the views here, obviously not picking sides, but it shows you there's no shared factual baseline for this debate.
Which makes navigating it really difficult.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, it means, well, significant legislative risk down the road. And we have another tax cliff coming. End of 2028, end of 2029. That's when those new deductions for tips, overtime, and a higher SALT cap expire.
Right. So uncertainty baked in. And beyond the economics, what about just making this work? Implementation.
Huge challenge for the IRS. These Trump accounts are brand new.
Yeah.
Defining those tip and overtime deductions clearly, it's a massive administrative lift.
Okay, so wrapping up. The OBBB Act, clearly it's sweeping, impacts your taxes, impacts big business decisions, impacts clean energy's future. It really feels like it captures a major ideological clash, doesn't it? Fiscal policy, schedulus, climate, it's all in there.
It absolutely is, and it sets up a really complex landscape going forward for individuals, for businesses. There are big implementation hurdles, and you can bet future legislative battles are basically guaranteed. I think the core question for you now is, how do these changes, both the temporary ones and the permanent ones, shape your own financial planning? And maybe more broadly, what does this signal about where economic policy is heading next?